Now to a News Nation exclusive investigation into a secret government experiment that was carried out in St. Louis. Residents tell us they still remember a mysterious fog. Children would run through it. Mothers would try and close their windows against it. For decades, they all had questions, and now we're seeking answers. The United States Army now admits that it sprayed a chemical that contained cadmium, a known carcinogen, on a neighborhood of more than 10,000 people. Critics say this was done with no warning and no consent. Well, tonight we return to the site of that demolished neighborhood and speak with former residents who believe the government turned them into human test subjects. Although the Army admits that the test happened, it is not a...
They always experiment on people, y'all. I told y'all that shit. They always experiment on human beings. They took that shit from animals straight to humans. Even with the Jab 19. That was an experiment. God damn it. Y'all don't learn that the government always experimenting on shit. These characters. God damn it. Wake up.
Believe the government turned them into human test subjects. Although the Army admits that the test happened, it is not admitted to harming the residents. News Nation's Natasha Zuvez investigates what was in the fog and why the truth may still be
running through the fog and all types of shit, bro.
The fog drifted through the streets like a ghost.
That's exactly what it looked like, a thick fog. It was summertime and it was hot. We would just run through it as fast as we could and try to just cool ourselves off. It stuck to you.
The spray was so foul as far as the odor. It made some of us have headaches, nausea, dizziness.
That's what I remember. It made me sick.
It wasn't the weather. It was an eerie smoke descending from rooftops, rolling from the backs of trucks.
Regular flatbed truck, but it had a big machine on the back. And it had a big nozzle that really sprayed up
shot that
fog
bitch.
You couldn't even see through. It was that thick, and it really
shot the driver of that fucking truck, man.
Adhered to our skin. And as far as the guys on top of the buildings, they tried to portray them to us as maintenance workers.
Yeah, all right.
But we was like, what is a maintenance worker doing? And basically a hazmat suit, and they had masks and goggles.
Y'all should have shot the motherfuckers,
in the 1950s and 60s, in secret, the U.S. Army sprayed zinc cadmium sulfide into the air of a St. Louis housing project, a largely black neighborhood called Pruitt-Igoe.
It was a lose-lose situation for us in Pruitt-Igoe. We were subjects. We were subjects. They didn't ask for our permission. We didn't ask for them to spray us. My government used me like I was a guinea pig.
We're standing at where Pruitt-Igoe used to be here in St. Louis, and it's hard to believe more than 10,000 people used to live here. As we bring our drone up, you can see it's mostly just an empty lot now, overgrown with trees. This used to be filled with 33 high-rise buildings. It was all demolished in 1976. And according to the National Research Council, St. Louis was chosen for spraying experiments because it had similar characteristics to Soviet targets like Moscow in terms of population density and terrain and proximity to a river. The government now admits to a secretive series of Cold War tests, including one dubbed large area coverage. More than 30 tests conducted across the U.S. and Canada, spraying zinc cadmium sulfide from planes, rooftops, and vehicles to simulate how a biological attack might spread, all to prepare for potential warfare against the Soviets.
Many of us been in the military and had top secret clearances. We know how it works.
We have died for America. We have fought for America.
You are a veteran.
I am United States Air Force veteran.
Dr. Starks, you're a veteran as well.
Yes, I am. I'm an Air Force veteran also.
Is there a sense of betrayal here?
Definitely.
They want to know if those secret tests have anything to do with what they're observing with their own eyes.
I lost my two older siblings to cancer. I lost a brother last month.
I've been diagnosed recently with a rare form of lymphoma.
I had cancer of the left kidney, had partial removal of my left kidney.
News Nation reached out to the Army for answers. They provided a one-page response. It says the Army's own Center for Health Promotion and Preventive Medicine investigated in 1994 and found inhalation exposure would not pose a health risk.
Now let's listen to the late Dr. Francis Quest Welsing on Genetic warfare, ladies and gentlemen. All right? Let's listen closely. I'll straight to the late queen. She came and warned us. All of our late ancestors came and warned us about the technology of the enemy, goddammit. And y'all ain't pay attention. Y'all didn't grasp the lesson. Goddammit. Let's go.
Now, the CIA and the military, it came out in the newspaper that they were designing chemical weapons where they could spray it on the enemy forces, and the enemy soldiers would begin to want to have sex with each other, and then they would be defeated. Now, if somebody is thinking to create such a chemicals, I say perhaps they have already deployed it.
Facts.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Facts. What do it do, Queen?
If they have chemicals and plastics that they understand are already affecting the sexuality of fish and frogs, and causing fish and frogs to become castrated and the males to become effeminized, why wouldn't they deploy it? It's just like I'm saying, anybody who thinks HIV/AIDS is some accident that fell out of the sky,
created.
I say wake up.
It was all created. Thanks, Queen.
See, wake up. My position is that it's biological warfare until proven otherwise.
Facts.
Until proven otherwise. They can be genetically annihilated. So it makes sense to them. It makes sense to them to do whatever damage or harm to the black population, because we are the population that is most feared.
Now you see, now you heard that from the late Queen. May her soul rest in power, goddammit. May her soul rest in power. Because she came and warned us about this foolishness. Experiments and using people as pawns on a chessboard. Let's go.
A one-page response. It says the Army's own Center for Health Promotion and Preventive Medicine investigated in 1994 and found inhalation exposure would not pose a health risk. They also cite later corroborating reviews, including a 1997 review by the National Research Council. Perhaps they assumed we wouldn't read the NRC's 380-page report, but we did, and the Army's statement doesn't show the full picture. In that 1997 review, the National Research Council explicitly says repeated exposure to zinc cadmium sulfide can cause kidney or bone toxicity or lung cancer if levels are high enough. And they admitted they couldn't fully assess the risk. Why? Because some Army records remain classified, it says, for national security reasons. More troubling, key Army exposure records were missing, and when the NRC asked the Army to supply them, the Army said it couldn't find them. Finally, the NRC considered conducting its own study, but concluded it wasn't feasible. In short, it did not test the site, collect samples, or test residents, and they didn't have access to all the data. Their review was based on what the Army gave them, and what the Army either could not find or withheld. The Army ends its statement to News Nation by saying, quote, none of the reports contained evidence of a radioactive component to the zinc-cadmium sulfide dispersion tests. Residents say the secrecy and delays are no accident.
They're waiting us out. They're waiting on all of us to die.
But that's not even the whole story, as residents demand to know what else could have been in that spray.
They have not come clean with what was in there.
Do you believe that it was just zinc cadmium sulfide in that spray?
No.
We go to the source, a researcher who has spent decades declassifying government documents about these tests. Do you believe the U.S. government sprayed some kind of radioactive material on the residents of St. Louis?
I believe that they did.
And the government's surprising response to our request to declassify
See, it was black and white people, but majority it was black people that got sprayed in the communities. Like they always come in the community, in the African American communities, with experiments. God damn it, remember? Even giving out them boxes of food with them turkeys was an experiment. I told y'all they got them boxes out of a lab, and God knows where. And none of this would be possible if your own peoples ain't sell y'all out. See, they need your own peoples to sell you out and get crumbs on the plate to turn the other cheek. And they're also being eliminated too with the crumbs they got around their mouth.
I believe the U.S. government sprayed some kind of radioactive material on the residents of St. Louis.
I believe that they did.
And the government's surprising response to our request to declassify information.
I mean, what the hell?
Plus, renowned activist Erin Brockovich weighs in. Do you think there's been a lie here, a cover-up here?
It sure looks that way.
Mm-hmm.
The residents are asking for an apology from the government for being experimented on. They are asking for compensation for health studies for... The residents are asking for an apology from the government for being experimented on. They are asking for compensation for health studies for themselves and their children. They're also asking for transparency. They want the government to release all the documents about the spraying. So, Elizabeth, tomorrow night on your show, we will go on a journey to try to declassify the one government document that a key researcher tells us she has never been able to expose. And we take the investigation to Erin Brockovich. For the residents still here, still fighting, the question is whether they will get any answers before it's too late. Elizabeth.
Well, they have a better chance of it with you on the case. Natasha Zuvez, thank you so much.
For them to spray us. My government used me like I was a guinea pig. Waiting us out.
Your government, huh?
The government admits it sprayed a chemical that contained cadmium, a known carcinogen. Critics say without warning and without consent. They sprayed it on a neighborhood of more than 10,000 people, but now years later, residents are getting sick, some with rare forms of cancer. And they're asking, what else might...
Pay attention. Like I said, with that experiment they rolled out on the peoples, the Democratic Party, right, is responsible for that, with Obama being the president, and he had an agenda because he had a battery in his back. And he started on that shit when he was the president. Then it was supposed to follow up with the win of Hillary Clinton, but she lost and Donald Trump defeated her. And then we turn around with the Biden administration and Harris, and they came in and rolled out them experiments on the African-American communities heavy, and niggas was selling niggas out once again. So like I said, down the road, do you know what you put in your system or what you vulnerable of catching or creating from a lab disease? I asked the people the question. I asked the people the questions. Do you know what you put in your system when you were sold out doing that experiment? God damn it. These people were sprayed with shit. They've been spraying the skies forever. Chemtrails, motherfuckers. People losing their minds out here. What are they spraying in the air? Guinea pigs?
We're on our way to meet with a researcher right now who has dedicated her career, decades, to declassifying documents and trying to figure out what exactly happened here in the city of St. Louis and what exactly was in that spray.
Mike Freeman, General
Across the country, the government conducted secret Cold War experiments in plain sight.
It was so secretive that we're really just now sort of digging out from underneath us to try to understand the scale of it.
And Dr. Lisa Martino-Taylor helped uncover many of them.
We know that they were giving radioactive cocktails to pregnant women. We know that they were feeding radioactive oatmeal to children in state schools. They've admitted to those things, and they won't release the material related to St. Louis.
It's true. American children in state-run institutions like the Fernald School were fed radioactive oatmeal as part of studies by MIT sponsored by the Atomic Energy Commission. You can see some of the documents Dr. Martino-Taylor worked to gather and declassify on MIT letterhead describing experiments on human subjects. The children, some of them orphans, were told they'd be joining a science club. They were promised a quart of milk a day, a trip to a baseball game, to the beach. A copy of the 1994 congressional hearing shows those children, now grown, describing being told the oatmeal was just vitamins and recalling the health problems that followed. Lumps on my arms, my stomach. Pregnant women were also unknowingly given radioactive iron at top hospitals in Tennessee and California to study how radiation crossed the placenta, some later reporting miscarriages, illness, or birth defects. A class action lawsuit resulted in a settlement in the 90s. Do you believe the U.S. government sprayed some kind of radioactive material on the residents of St. Louis?
I believe that they did. There's so much contextual evidence that points that way, and I spent years looking at this.
She says her research reveals the men who designed and oversaw the St. Louis experiments were some of the top experts in radioactive weapons.
Radioactive turkeys, they was passing on all types of shit.
Who oversaw the study, these were all the radiological weapons experts who were looking at open air radiological weapons.
One of them, Brigadier General William Creasy, was head of the Army Chemical Corps, the very branch leading America's secret radiological weapons program during the Cold War. He brought in a scientist named Philip Layton, who was the Army's leading authority on using radioactive particles in aerosol form, fog-like clouds designed to drift over enemy terrain. So the very man who designed this spraying experiment in St. Louis was an expert in using radioactive fog against the enemy.
Yes, he was the expert.
Francis Cress Wells, he said it
Then
better.
she says there's the timing.
They were looking for a city to test their offensive weapons program. They wanted to do it. They expressed this in documents. St. Louis was their chosen city. That was their analog city to Moscow. And they wanted to do this in 1953. They showed up in 1953 in St. Louis.
But there's one document Dr. Martino Taylor has never been able to unearth. It's still classified. The Joint Quarterly Reports detail the spraying experiments, all written by Layton himself. The last one is missing. It's called Joint Quarterly Report 5, and we tried to get it. Our team filed a Freedom of Information Act request on May 5th of 2025. By law, the government must respond to a FOIA within 20 working days, but it's been more than 3 months with multiple follow-ups. Nothing. The silence is what's called a constructive denial, and renowned activist Erin Brockovich says it reminds her of cases where the truth was hidden. So, Erin, what is your reaction to this News Nation investigation? Did this shock even you?
Absolutely. I think my comment was, are we WTF the kidding me? I mean, what the hell? It's awful. I mean, the biggest thing, and I've learned in 30 years, is it's always the cover-up. That enrages people, that hurts people.
Like the Jab
and
19.
I've learned that communities can handle the truth. What they don't handle and where they'll tip a scale is the lie. So this has been a cover-up, and I think that modern-day agencies owe it to them. The truth.
Do you think there's been a lie here, a cover-up here?
It sure looks that way.
Our investigation now drawing attention from lawmakers, including Congressman Wesley Bell of Missouri.
When American citizens have been impacted and exposed to chemicals specifically because of the federal government, I think that we should do as Democrats and Republicans,
Jab 19,
we should all do
nigga?
the right thing, make certain
That was
to
a
make these
cover up
folks
from the
whole
government
again,
once again.
get them the compensation they deserve and the treatment that they
nigga.
need.
They're gonna get an apology. That's it.
It can happen to you. Don't get duped that it can't happen to you. We didn't think it was gonna happen to us. We was babies, kids. It can happen to you too.
Representative Bell is now fighting to get Pruitt.
Just like the brother said, it can happen to you, and it already happened to you. When y'all lined up and took that experiment, God damn it. The fuck y'all think it's a game? You think I'm coming up here, keep telling y'all this shit, drilling this shit in your head? It was taught them and told to me, that warned y'all that y'all took an experiment, God damn it, and you was sold out by the same people you elected that look just like you.
It can happen to you too.
Representative Bell is now fighting to get Pruitt-Igoe included in the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act that would provide payouts to Americans who can prove they were exposed to radiation during the Cold War. But for Pruitt-Igoe residents, there's a catch. Because key records remain classified, they haven't been able to prove what they were exposed to. What do you want everyone to know about what happened here?
The truth. Whatever the truth is, we want them to know the truth.
I'm going to tell you all the truth.
In the meantime, residents say all they can do is wait, hoping someone finally listens. When will you give up this fight?
Never. Till I'm cold and dead and buried in my grave.
Close read of that report shows even the NRC admitted they could not fully assess the risk of the spraying, because when they asked the Army for key records, the Army replied the documents were either classified or they were missing. The Army could not find them. And Elizabeth, I have to tell you, these residents feel the government is waiting them out. The people you just heard from last night and tonight are the ones who are still here, who are well enough to speak. One woman we were supposed to meet with died before we could get to her. She was suffering from multiple cancers. Her daughter asked us to keep going, and we will keep pushing for information, including those classified documents, Elizabeth.
All right, Natasha Zuva, stay on the case. Thank you.
Is that love for you or hate? Is that love for you or hate?
This is not speculation. Every detail in this episode comes directly from declassified U.S. government documents. In April of 1961, the United States launched a secret invasion of Cuba. It was supposed to be quick, surgical, quiet, but instead it became one of the greatest foreign policy disasters in American history. Over 1,400 CIA-backed exiles stormed the beaches of the Bay of Pigs, and within 3 days, they were either captured, killed, or forced to surrender. The plan had been to overthrow Fidel Castro. What America got instead was a global embarrassment. In the months that followed, something changed inside the United States national security apparatus. Publicly, Washington claimed restraint. Privately, it was a different story. Behind closed doors, military leaders believed the only way forward was war. But with the American people still reeling from a failed invasion, public support wasn't guaranteed. That's when a new plan was drafted. One that would guarantee outrage, one that would rally the nation, and one that, if approved, would cross a line no republic should ever entertain. A plan that, if executed, would have killed innocent Americans on American soil, just to start a war. The plan called for hijackings, bombings, staged funerals, even a fake airliner explosion.
Staged funerals.
And none of it was coming from a foreign enemy.
It's coming from the government.
It came from the Pentagon. This wasn't a rogue idea scribbled on a napkin. This was signed off by the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Wow.
They called it Operation Northwoods.
I heard of that.
So why would a U.S. military plan a false flag terror attack on its own people? And what does it say about the lines our leaders are willing to cross when they think no one's watching? Let's try and find out. The Bay of Pigs wasn't just a military disaster. It was a psychological one. For the CIA, it was a gut punch. For the Pentagon, a humiliation. And for the Kennedy administration, a PR nightmare.
Is that why he took one
what
to the
most
lemon?
Americans didn't realize was that President John F. Kennedy had only been in office for 3 months when the invasion began. He hadn't created the plan, he had inherited it.
Wow.
A cockamamie CIA scheme hatched under the Eisenhower administration that was already in motion by the time he took the oath of office.
They create
the
shit.
invasion had been sold as airtight, but in reality, it was underfunded, poorly coordinated, and based on a wildly optimistic assumptions about the Cuban people rising up against Castro. They didn't. The world watched as America's covert operation fell apart in real time. Castro paraded prisoners in front of cameras. Khrushchev mocked U.S. weakness. And inside Washington, patience wore thin. And once given the green light, the failure landed squarely on Kennedy's shoulders. The Joint Chiefs of Staff, America's top military leaders, began pushing for something far more aggressive. They didn't want another half-baked mission. They wanted a full-scale invasion of Cuba. But there was a problem. The American people weren't interested in another war. Not after Korea, not after the Bay of Pigs. And without public outrage, there could be no political mandate for military action. That's when a new idea emerged. Not one based on intelligence or diplomacy, but on manipulation. If they couldn't win the hearts and minds, honestly, they'd manufacture the crisis themselves.
They always do that shit.
And in March of 1962, the U.S. Department of Defense submitted a proposal that would send shockwaves through history, though the public wouldn't learn about it for another 35 years.
Wow.
The proposal was called Operation Northwoods.
Operation Jab 19.
And it came directly from the Joint Chiefs of Staff,
they won't know
America's highest-ranking military brass. And it wasn't just one bad idea, it was a checklist of chaos. The plan outlined a series of false flag operations, attacks that would appear to be carried out by Cuba, but were actually staged by the U.S. government. The goal? Create a public justification for a full-scale military invasion. Some of the suggestions read like scenes from a dystopian screenplay. They included fake hijackings of commercial airlines blamed on Cuban agents, bombings in Miami, Washington, and even inside U.S. military installations. A drone airliner, painted to match a real passenger flight, would be remotely destroyed over Cuban waters. A list of fake victims, complete with staged funerals, would be published to sell the illusion. They even considered sinking a U.S. Navy ship and faking Cuban sabotage, or staging a deadly riot among Cuban exiles in Florida, supposedly incited by Castro's agents. The memo even referenced history itself, suggesting a new Remember the Maine incident, a nod to 1898 when the mysterious explosion of a U.S. warship triggered war with Spain. They wanted to follow the same blueprint, manufacture a tragedy, blame the enemy, and rally the nation.
They always do that shit.
Assassinating Cuban refugees or American civilians to generate a helpful wave of indignation across the country.
That's what they did with the Jab 19.
These weren't theoretical suggestions buried in the footnotes.
The deaths and all that shit.
They were written in plain language,
they got that
deliberate,
shit from
cold,
this shit here, yo.
methodical. And most disturbing of all, the Joint Chiefs of Staff didn't just brainstorm the plan, they signed off on it.
Look at them.
The document was approved by General Lyman Lemnitzer, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and delivered to the Secretary of Defense in March of 1962. The final decision now rested with one man, the President of the United States.
That's why he took one to the limit.
The Northwoods proposal was submitted to Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara.
Motherfucker pushed
from
the
there,
shit back.
It made its way to the President.
They got their
John
hands
F.
on
Kennedy
the document.
was just over a year into his first term, still weathering the blowback from the Bay of Pigs, still battling his own military leadership behind closed doors. But this time, the Joint Chiefs of Staff had gone too far.
Hitler motherfuckers.
Operation Northwoods wasn't a military plan. It was a blueprint for domestic terrorism. The document was signed and endorsed by the most powerful generals in America. General Lyman Lemnitzer.
Look at these motherfuckers from Hitler.
General Curtis LeMay.
Hitler and the men.
General George H. Decker.
In U.S. uniforms. That's crazy.
Admiral George W. Anderson Jr.
Former
and
Nazis.
General David M. Shoup. General Lyman Lemnitzer wasn't some loose cannon. He was a decorated World War II veteran, a key architect of Cold War defense strategy, and the most powerful military officer in the United States, which made his approval of Northwoods all the more chilling.
Northwoods.
These weren't fringe actors.
Operation Northwood.
These were the Pentagon's top brass. And President Kennedy, he rejected it. No edits, no debate, no discussion.
Is that why they shot him in the
He
lemon?
shut the whole thing down.
See, yup.
Lemnitzer was quietly pushed out months later, reassigned to a NATO command.
And that's why Kennedy
Northwoods
took one
was
to the
buried,
lemon.
locked away in the classified vaults of the Pentagon,
Wow.
where it remained hidden for over 35 years. Operation Northwoods was never carried out, but its existence tells us something critical.
Wow.
Not just about the Cold
That's why
War,
Kennedy
but
took
about
one to the
power.
lemon, man.
In 1962, the top military
shutting
minds of
that shit
America
down.
proposed
What
terror
that reminds
attacks
y'all
on its
of?
own people.
Trump shutting shit down.
And they did it so
And they
confidently
tried to
because they
assassinate that
believed the
man
ends justified the
several
means.
times. Because he's
That
not part
alone
of the
should have
agenda.
sparked a national scandal,
Wow.
but it didn't. Northwoods
Wow.
remained buried until 1997, when it was uncovered through a sweep of documents released by the JFK Assassination Records Review Board. The plan
That's
sat
why
untouched
JFK took
in
one to the
Pentagon
lemon.
archives for decades,
He was shutting
until a
that shit
handful of
down.
researchers started asking the right questions. And by then, all of the architects were gone. And the Cold War they hoped to escalate was long over. For historians, it became a case study in how far democracy can drift behind closed doors. For others, it raised darker questions.
Wow.
Why would a government even consider something like this? What else might have been proposed and buried?
Wow.
Operation Northwoods wasn't some isolated idea. Elements inside the U.S. government had long considered psychological warfare and staged provocations. From World War II deception operations to Cold War contingency planning. The logic was always the same. If public opinion won't go where you want it, give it a push.
Hitler motherfuckers.
But most of all, what would have happened if Kennedy had said yes? In the months after he rejected Northwoods, his relationship with the Joint Chiefs deteriorated. He grew increasingly skeptical of the CIA, the Pentagon, and even his own advisors.
Y'all paying
he publicly
attention.
Stated he wanted to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it into the winds.
Shout out to Kennedy,
then,
man.
On November 22nd, 1963, John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas.
Why?
Officially, there's no connection.
But come on, man. This shit is right here in our face.
Operation Northwoods remains one of the most compelling exhibits in the long, dark shadow of the JFK conspiracy theories. Because once you learn that America's own generals drafted a plan to kill Americans for political gain, suddenly the unthinkable doesn't seem so far-fetched. Let us know your thoughts about Operation Northwoods in the comment sections below.
Oh, I say it again. You've been had. You've been took. You've been